Welcome to Literary Journeys with River. Today we bring you the summary of Merrick, the 7th book in Anne Rice's The Vampire Chronicles. Remember, this is just a summary, not the full book. If you enjoy this kind of content, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Also, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. That's the best way to help YouTube recommend our channel and keep us growing. Let's get started. Preface. David Talbot introduces himself as the narrator of the story, revealing his past as the superior general of the Talamasca, an ancient order dedicated to studying the paranormal. Though he served the organization in his mortal life, his fate changed when the vampire Lestat stormed into his existence, transforming him into a creature of the night. Now a powerful and feared vampire, he has earned the trust of beings like Armand, whose life story he once published. In New Orleans, the vampire community has drastically changed. The reckless young ones who once gathered around Lestat have vanished, either destroyed or dispersed. The ancient ones have followed their own paths, leaving only 3 vampires in the city: Lestat, lost in a deep slumber, and his 2 loyal companions, Louis and David. Thus, the story begins in an atmosphere of mystery and shadows, where the past and present intertwine. Chapter 1. David Talbot meets with Merrick Mayfair at a cafe in New Orleans to ask for a dangerous favor: to use her magic to summon the spirit of Claudia, the child vampire who haunts Louis de Pointe du Lac. Now a strong and enigmatic woman, Merrick is cautious yet intrigued. David recalls their first encounter when she was just a child with a lineage of powerful witches. Raised by her godmother, Grand Nan, and Merrick grew up with a legacy of voodoo magic and exceptional psychic abilities. Her intelligence and audacity made her a prominent figure within the Talamasca. Despite their shared past, David knows he is manipulating her for Louis's sake. However, Merrick holds affection for him and does not immediately refuse. As their conversation progresses, memories of their relationship resurface, revealing a deeper and more complex bond between them. Chapter 2. Merrick and David continue their conversation at the cafe as night falls. Merrick recalls her arrival at the Talamasca, influenced by a prophetic dream of Grand Nan, and in which Aaron Leitner and Uncle Julian Mayfair pointed her toward her destiny. David reflects on his past with the Order and Aaron's role as his mentor and friend, regretting that he never reached out to him before his death. Merrick reveals that she possesses secret documents from Aaron about the body-switching incident that turned David into a vampire, papers she never handed over to the elders. She confesses that she has always loved him and will not allow him to disappear from her life. As memories and confessions unfold, the attraction between them becomes undeniable. Aware of his vampire nature, David fears corrupting her, but Merrick is determined to stay by his side, even if it means stepping into his dark world. Chapter 3. David and Merrick, caught in a dangerous desire, walk through the streets of New Orleans, enveloped in a tension that threatens to consume them. The scent of Merrick and the warmth of her blood awaken David's predatory instincts, which he struggles to suppress. At the Windsor Court Hotel, Merrick falls into a deep sleep, unaware of the inner storm raging within David. As he steps outside, an eerie sensation of being watched follows him. Unknown figures seem to stalk him from the shadows, and Merrick's image appears in impossible places. In a doorway, he is stunned by a vision of the young woman alongside her deceased godmother, Grand Nan. Witchcraft intertwines with his reality, unleashing fears that not even his vampire nature can explain. Chapter 4. David returns, unsettled, to the house on Rue Royale, where the sound of a harpsichord echoes through the walls. He seeks refuge in the writings of Aaron, his old Talamasca friend, discovering the pain his disappearance caused. Aaron, convinced that David would return, left behind records of his loyalty. Guilt consumes him. On the verge of exhaustion, the atmosphere shifts. The chirping of birds and the sound of the harpsichord evoke the past. It is an echo that recalls the presence of Claudia, the child vampire. Confused and disturbed, he seeks answers from Louis, who finds him lost in thought. David reveals his encounter with Merrick and the strange manifestations haunting him. The suspicion that spiritual forces have been unleashed grows stronger, as does the uncertainty surrounding Merrick's true nature. Chapter 5. David tells Lewis about his meeting with Merrick and the spell she performed. Lewis, surprised, confesses that he had seen Merrick in the past and sensed her power. The idea of summoning Claudia torments him, yet his need to know if her soul is at peace drives him forward. David explains the nature of magic, separate from the physical world of vampires, and warns of the risks involved in meddling with unknown forces. Lewis shows him an old photograph of Claudia, his only real image of her, obtained in Paris. His desire is not to speak with her, but to ensure that her spirit is not suffering. Their unease grows as they realize that Merrick's ritual may reveal more than they had imagined. Before setting out to hunt for blood, Lewis accepts David's company, both aware that the witch's shadow has changed the course of their fates. Chapter 6. David and Lewis wander through New Orleans, venturing into ruined neighborhoods where crumbling houses and misery reign. As they walk the streets, David reflects on the crisis that has shaken the vampire community following the publication of Lestat's memoirs. The city has been overrun with rogue vampires, leading to chaos that culminated in a bloody purge led by Lestat and Armand. However, Lestat has now fallen into a deep slumber, oblivious to the world, lying motionless as classical music fills his sanctuary. With only David and Lewis left as hunters in the city, they must tread carefully. While searching for sustenance, they find a house where two young women, lost to vice, waste away. With lethal precision, Lewis selects them as his prey. Upon returning home, David senses the unsettling presence of a black cat and grows suspicious of Merrick. Chapter 7. David awakens on a clear night and discovers that Merrick has hurriedly departed for London in search of ancient objects linked to Claudia. Intrigued and concerned, he returns to the house on Rue Royale, where a massive black cat crosses his path. Meanwhile, he recalls his first encounter with Grandnan and Merrick's godmother in her old New Orleans home. The clairvoyant and powerful old woman recognized a mystical connection between David and the magic of Candomblé, warning him about her goddaughter's enchanted bloodline. Upon her death, Merrick inherited an ancient book of magic attributed to Cam, son of Noah, a grimoire filled with dark secrets. David is captivated by its antiquity and forbidden knowledge. Merrick's story and lineage unravel as an enigma, woven with rituals, spirits, and ancestral powers that have surrounded her since birth. Chapter 8. Returning to her childhood home, Merrick confronts memories of her past. A group of Talamasca acolytes awaits to collect the house's belongings. Amid shadows and the murmur of water, she explores the voodoo altar, where she finds burning candles, saint statues, and a cauldron used in rituals. On the altar, she discovers a gruesome human hand covered in ants. Moving toward a tree, a serpent coils around her arms. She announces her intention to dismantle the house and leave with the Talamasca. In the attic, she reveals her treasure: an Olmec jade axe, carved idols, and a ritual perforator. She confesses her desire to study and learn, following the path of Matthew, the man who educated her. As she descends, she prepares coffee and recalls Matthew's death and Sandra the Cold's departure. Finally, she reaffirms her determination to join the order. Chapter 9. After a dinner in New Orleans, Merrick falls into a deep sleep at the Talamasca mother house. Her room has been meticulously prepared, blending elegance with knowledge. While inspecting her luggage, they discover more Olmec treasures and Matthew's journal detailing the expedition where they were found. During the night, Merrick awakens possessed by the spirit of her sister, Honey in the Sunshine. Her demeanor turns brazen and provocative, venomously recalling David Talbot's past. When confronted, the entity resists, but with strength and faith, David manages to expel it. Once freed, Merrick reveals the truth. Honey and Sandra were murdered 4 years prior. Gran Nanan's spirit intervened to guide them into the light. Finally, Merrick declares herself free from her past, ready to begin her new life within the Talamasca. Chapter 10. David concludes his account to Lewis at the house on Rue Royale. The warm glow of the lamps illuminates Lewis's collection of impressionist paintings, a refuge of beauty amid painful memories. David reflects on his friendship with Merrick and the bonds they shared in the Talamasca. His mind drifts to Joshua, a young man whose death haunts him, a victim of an avalanche in the Himalayas. Guilt follows him, along with the shadow of his love for Merrick. Lewis listens patiently, recognizing the depth of David's affection for the woman. Despite his regrets, David admits that he was always destined to seek her out. Now, Merrick has agreed to summon Claudia, and David must confess everything before their meeting takes place. With his characteristic melancholy, Lewis urges him to continue the story. Chapter 11. David reminisces about his youth with Merrick in the Talamasca, where she grew up without a legal identity. Her mother, Sandra the Cold, and her sister, Honey in the Sunshine, had lived under false names, their deaths shrouded in mystery. The legacy of Matthew, the archaeologist who raised her, included documents about an expedition searching for Olmec treasures. In letters to his dying mother, Matthew described a hidden temple, a cave behind a waterfall, and unknown jade artifacts. His tragic end came from the sting of a lethal insect. Merrick, absorbed in her studies, ignored the past until fate pulled her back in. She became a brilliant yet reserved woman, avoiding the romantic advances of her peers at Oxford. However, her dreams tormented her. The spirit of Uncle Vervain called to her, urging her to return to the cave. Her obsession led her to make an inevitable decision. Chapter 12. David arrives at Merrick's home in New Orleans, alarmed by her isolation and growing obsession. Upon entering, he finds an altar filled with saints, jade idols, and a ritual knife. Lost in her memories, Merrick drinks rum and begins a strange ritual, dancing and sprinkling fire over the candles. Suddenly, she makes a startling confession. As a child, she cursed Sandra the Cold and Honey, wishing for their deaths. Her desperation drives her to summon her deceased sister. The spirit of Honey appears at the door, her golden hair and glowing eyes shining in the dim light. With a voice full of resentment, she reveals the names of the places Merrick seeks: Guatemala and Santa Cruz del Flores. With the information written in her own blood, Merrick pleads with her sister not to abandon her. But the spirit vanishes, leaving her sobbing in David's arms. Chapter 13. Wounded from the ritual, Merrick is taken to the hospital by David, who struggles to fully comprehend her power. The vision of Honey in the Sunshine spirit has terrified him. Merrick becomes obsessed with traveling to the jungle in search of the cave from her childhood and convinces David to accompany her. Despite his doubts, he relents, feeling invigorated by the adventure. 4 Talamasca assistants join the expedition. After a long journey by plane and jeep, they arrive in Santa Cruz del Flores, a remote Mayan village. The community welcomes them warmly, and Merrick recognizes the place from her past. The small church, colorful houses, and lush jungle remain unchanged. In their tent, the tension between Merrick and David escalates. The attraction is undeniable, and that night, he succumbs to his desires, feeling trapped by her power. Chapter 14. At dawn, David and Merrick set out, hacking their way through the jungle with machetes. The rainforest surrounds them with its humidity and wild sounds, while ancient ruins emerge from the vegetation. In a clearing, they find an abandoned village. The atmosphere is unsettling, filled with unseen presences. They continue toward an unknown pyramid, its architecture defying classification. The air grows heavy, as if something invisible is watching them. Merrick insists on crossing an ancient temple to reach the cave, facing growing spiritual resistance. Invisible blows, whispers, and a shower of leaves accompany their progress. Finally, they reach the cave, guarded by a massive basalt head and surrounded by recent offerings. The spirits attack them with fury, but Merrick seizes a sacred mask. As they flee, a violent force pursues them, but they manage to escape with their prized artifact. Chapter 15. Back in the village, Merrick examines the mask and tests its power. Through it, she sees Honey in the Sunshine, realizing that the entity has led her here for a dark purpose. Exhausted, David begins to feel ill, falling into a feverish state filled with visions. In his delirium, he sees the spirit of an ancient priest begging him to return the mask. He is rushed to a hospital in Guatemala, where he teeters between life and death. Merrick uses the mask to keep his soul from leaving his body. Once recovered, David returns to New Orleans. The mask is locked away in a vault, but Merrick continues to feel Honey's presence. Years later, Honey's murderer is found and, shortly after, dies by suicide, haunted by visions. Now, David returns to Merrick with a new request: to summon the soul of Claudia. Chapter 16. David concludes his story about Merrick in the early morning hours, and Lewis listens, deeply moved. They reflect on their own nature and the differences between them. Haunted by his past, Lewis insists on contacting Claudia's spirit and proposes a pact. They will protect Merrick without harming her. Despite his anguish, David persuades him to proceed with the plan. Lewis confesses his desperation, his desire to see spirits, to feel the supernatural as David and Merrick do. When they receive a letter from her summoning them to her home, anticipation builds. Lewis visits Lestat, who remains in his deep slumber, and bids him farewell. The following night, David and Lewis meet with Merrick. Upon seeing her, Lewis is captivated by her beauty and strength. Merrick accepts the challenge of summoning Claudia but warns that spirits are deceptive. The pact is sealed. Chapter 17. Lewis and David arrive at Merrick's house, where she welcomes them with an air of authority. A connection immediately forms between Merrick and Lewis, stirring David's jealousy. Tension grows as Merrick examines Claudia's belongings: her diary, her rosary, and her doll. Seeing them, Lewis relives his pain. Merrick asks him to read an entry from the diary where Claudia confesses her intertwined love and hatred. Despite the emotional impact, Lewis remains determined to go through with the summoning. Merrick demands a sacrifice. To attract Claudia's spirit, she needs human blood. David is appalled, but Lewis offers himself, willing to give his own blood for the ritual. Merrick agrees. The ceremony will take place in an hour, at the altar in the backyard. Meanwhile, Lewis and David go hunting, and in a miserable bar, Lewis feeds on a drunkard, gaining the strength needed for what is to come. Chapter 18. After feeding, Lewis and David discuss Merrick's nature. David fears for her, convinced that Lewis's power is drawing her in. However, Lewis insists that his attraction to her is superficial and that he will never harm her. Still concerned, David urges him to reconsider, but Lewis refuses. They return to Merrick's house, their decision made. Upon arrival, Lewis recalls a crucial detail: Claudia's mother's name, Agatha, which could strengthen the summoning. The tension in the air is palpable. Merrick awaits them in the backyard, where everything is set for the ritual. The old altar glows under candlelight, and the scent of incense fills the night. At that moment, Merrick's magic and Lewis's blood will merge to open the gateway to the beyond and bring Claudia's spirit back into the world of the living. Chapter 19. Under the altar's candlelight, Merrick prepares her spell. With her face hidden behind the jade mask, she warns Lewis and David not to interfere. On the tables before them, she places Claudia's doll, a page from her diary, a rosary, and a daguerreotype. Around the steaming cauldron, the incense forms a circle, and Merrick invokes the saints and ancestral spirits. With her blood and Lewis's, she calls forth Honey in the sunshine, her deceased sister, who briefly appears before vanishing. Then, a new shadow emerges. Claudia, dressed in white, her golden hair floating in the dim light. Her childlike voice asks Lewis why he has called her. But her words bring no solace, only condemnation. With unwavering hatred, she accuses him of having destroyed her and urges him to follow her into death. Then, in an unexpected gesture, she raises a weapon and plunges it into his chest. Chapter 20. David leaves Merrick resting in her bed, exhausted after the ritual. On the altar in her room, he places the shattered fragments of the jade perforator and the broken mask. He finds her consumed by remorse, convinced that Claudia's spirit was a lie, an entity that preyed on Lewis's fears. David comforts her, but doubt gnaws at him. He recalls the spell Merrick performed days ago and how he saw the spirit of Grand Nanan, who had warned him about her. Merrick, surprised, denies having summoned her, insisting that her godmother is at peace in the light. Despite her words, fear flickers in her eyes. Unable to resist his attraction to her, David kisses her before departing. He knows they must part ways but promises to return. As he steps outside, a deep sense of loss washes over him. He thinks of Louis and fears for his fate. Chapter 21. David finds Louis at the house on Rue Royale. His wound remains open, but he refuses help. Louis believes that the spirit was truly Claudia, that she had come from the darkness to confirm his damnation. David tries to reason with him, warning that death will not bring him peace. But Louis is resolute. Suddenly, he claims to hear Claudia's music, the same melody she loved in life. He rises, disturbed, insisting that she is calling him. David stops him, pleading for him to stay a little longer. Consumed by despair, Louis agrees to wait a few more nights. As he leaves, he places Claudia's daguerreotype on the table. David feels a shiver as he looks at it. Later, he visits the convent where Lestat sleeps. Sitting beside him, he tells him everything, begging him to wake up. But the vampire remains motionless, trapped in his eternal slumber, unaware of the tragedy unfolding. Chapter 22. David desperately searches for Merrick and Louis throughout the city, but neither is anywhere to be found. He returns several times to the Rue Royale apartment but finds no trace of Louis. Finally, he discovers Merrick in the Oak Haven library, drunk and alone in her old leather chair. David realizes she is hiding for her own safety. However, his concern for Louis grows. On the third day, Louis reappears at Rue Royale, elegant yet enigmatic. He confesses that he cannot stop thinking about Merrick, that he sees her everywhere, and that his love for her surpasses even what he once felt for Claudia. Desperate, he declares that he needs to see her, that his existence revolves around her. Alarmed, David accuses Merrick of casting a spell on him using her blood. But Louis refuses to believe it. Determined, he insists on meeting with her, no matter the consequences. Chapter 23. Louis and David go to Oak Haven to find Merrick, but she is not there. In his desperation, Louis refuses to wait any longer and heads straight to Merrick's house in New Orleans. When he arrives, she welcomes him with open arms, and they give in to their passion. Distressed, David warns them that they are playing with dangerous forces, but Merrick asks him to leave them alone. Resigned, David departs. That same night, Louis makes a fatal decision. Before dawn, he lies in a coffin in the Rue Royale garden and waits for the sun. In his farewell letter to David, he confesses that he turned Merrick into a vampire out of love but cannot live with the guilt. When David arrives, he finds Louis's body charred, intact like a statue of ash. Merrick, devastated, begs David to save him, but they do not know if Louis still exists within those burned remains. Chapter 24. When all seems lost, Lestat appears at Rue Royale. With unsteady steps, he gazes at Louis's body and asks David to listen for any sign of life. David hears nothing, but Merrick insists they must try to save him. Moved, Lestat spills his blood over the charred remains. David and Merrick do the same. The blackened body begins to smoke, and suddenly Louis awakens. Reborn, stronger and more radiant than ever. They take him to the apartment, bathe him, and dress him. Lestat offers his blood to complete his restoration. Meanwhile, Merrick reveals her greatest secret. Since learning that David was a vampire, she cast a spell to draw him into her life. As proof, she shows the embalmed hand of her former human body. With her plan fulfilled, Merrick accepts Lestat's blood to strengthen herself. In the end, Louis confesses what he saw upon dying. Nothing. No light, no darkness. Only a terrifying void. Chapter 25. Despite receiving Lestat's blood, Merrick does not reach his power level, but she improves significantly. Together, they form a united coven and revel in their new existence. However, 2 nights later, Merrick and Lewis burst into Rue Royale with alarming news. The Talamasca is watching them and demands that Merrick return to them. A letter from the elders warns that if she does not comply, they will declare war on the vampires. Furious, Lestat refuses to flee, but Merrick insists they must leave. Eventually, they agree to abandon New Orleans. They spend their last night destroying evidence in their sanctuaries before departing. Before leaving, David writes a final letter to the Talamasca, warning them that they have provoked Lestat's wrath. At dawn, Lestat urges him to move on, promising not to attack the Order unless provoked. Thus, the vampires leave the city behind and disappear into the world. Thanks for watching this summary of Merrick. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe, give it a thumbs up, and share it with your friends. Now tell me in the comments, do you think Merrick made the right choice in embracing vampirism? Which other book from the Vampire Chronicles would you like us to summarize next?